The fall of the Queen. The battlefield burned under two suns. Screams, laser fire, and falling war machines filled the air. In the center stood Queen Thalzara, tall and proud, her golden armor shining despite the blood splattered on it. She was known across galaxies as the fierce Fang of Korath, a warrior queen who had never lost a battle. Her enemies feared her name. Her soldiers worshipped her. But that day, fate had other plans. A blast shook the ground. The Queen's hover tank exploded behind her, knocking her off her feet. Before she could rise, a massive spiked drone flew toward her. She turned, too late. Crack! The drone slammed into her leg, crushing it like glass. Thalzara screamed and fell into the red dirt. She tried to stand, but her leg was twisted, blood pouring from her armor. She reached for her comm, but it was broken. Around her, the battlefield shifted. Her warriors were falling back. Panic spread. "Hold the line," she shouted. But no one answered. They were leaving her. Even her own guards, loyal since childhood, ran. None looked back. Far behind the battle, hiding in the smoke, stood a young man in torn clothes. A human. Callum. He was a slave, taken from Earth 2 years ago, beaten, used, forgotten. His job had been cleaning boots, carrying supplies, sleeping, near the beast pens. Queen Thalzara never even looked at him, but he had watched her. He saw her power, her pride, her cruelty. Now, she was broken. Callum saw her fall, saw her scream, and then saw everyone leave her behind like garbage. He didn't know why. Maybe it was madness, maybe it was something else. But he moved toward her. Thalzara dragged herself behind a pile of debris. Her vision blurred. Pain burned through her body. She bit her tongue to stay awake. Suddenly, footsteps. Soft. Careful. She grabbed a sharp rock and raised it weakly. A human appeared from the smoke. "Don't touch me," she growled, baring her fangs. "I'm not here to hurt you," Callum said calmly. "You're bleeding. You'll die here." "I'd rather die than be touched by a slave," she hissed. He knelt beside her anyway. "Good. Then let's pretend I'm not a slave anymore," she stared at him. This thing? This weak, useless creature? She had kicked him once for dropping her armor. Now he was trying to save her? "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you help me?" He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled fabric from his torn shirt and tied it tightly around her leg. She screamed again and hit him across the face with her weak arm, but he didn't stop. The sky darkened as enemy ships flew above. They were scanning the field, looking for survivors. Callum looked around. They had to move. "I have to carry you," he said. "You'll drop me," she muttered. "You're too weak." "Maybe," he replied, "but you'll die if I don't." She didn't answer. Her eyes fluttered. Blood loss. He lifted her gently. She was tall and heavy in her armor, but he gritted his teeth and stood up. Every step was slow and painful. Her blood soaked his arms. Her golden helmet fell off. They disappeared into the trees. Hours passed. Callum finally found a half-burned escape pod crashed near a rocky hill. It was cold, but sheltered. He laid her down inside and started a small fire with scraps. Thalzara was unconscious now. He looked at her face. Even with blood, dirt, and pain, she looked powerful and strangely calm. She had ruled planets. Now she was broken, and in his care. As night fell, Callum sat outside the pod, holding a sharpened stick. Enemy patrols moved in the distance. He didn't sleep. He just listened to the Queen's shallow breathing and waited. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But tonight, the galaxy's fiercest queen was alive, only because of a human she once called nothing. Rain fell through the broken ceiling of the crashed pod. Queen Thalzara groaned in pain. Her eyes opened slowly. Everything was blurry. Her armor was off. Her body was covered in bandages, messy, but working. And beside the fire, she saw him, The human. He sat with a sharpened stick in hand. His clothes were wet, face bruised, hands dirty. Yet his eyes stayed alert, scanning the darkness beyond the broken hatch. She tried to sit up but gasped. Her leg throbbed, wrapped in rags, tied with scrap cords. "You moved me," she said weakly. He turned. "Yeah, you wouldn't last on the field." "You touched me," she growled louder. "You were bleeding. Forgive me for saving your life." She wanted to curse him, wanted to throw something, but her arms were weak, her body broken. And she knew the truth. She would have died back there if he hadn't come. She lay back, breathing hard. "You're just a slave." Callum looked at her, his face calm but cold. Not anymore. By morning, he had made a sled from ship debris. He tied ropes around his shoulders and placed her gently on top. She didn't speak much, just stared at the back of his head while he dragged her across muddy ground, through vines, around fallen ships and old craters. The path wasn't safe. Drones still searched the area. Twice they had to hide in the mud. Once, Callum rolled them, both into a ditch, and covered her body with his own to keep her hidden. Her eyes widened when he did that. He could have run, left her, saved himself, but he didn't. By sunset, he found a cave hidden behind a waterfall. The entrance was small, the air damp, but inside it was dry and warm. He gently helped her off the sled, setting her near the fire he built. He boiled some old army rations in a metal plate and placed them in her hands. She stared at the food. "You're not eating?" "There's only enough for one." "But you carried me all day." He shrugged. "You're the one dying, not me." For the first time, she stayed quiet. Her pride felt heavy, like chains around her throat. This was a man she had once ordered to kneel, to clean her weapons. She never knew his name, never asked. Now he was feeding her, caring for her. That night, thunder rolled outside the cave. Water poured down in sheets. The queen lay on a bed of leaves and cloth while Callum stood guard at the entrance. She couldn't sleep. "Why didn't you leave me?" she asked finally. He didn't turn. "Would you have left me?" She thought for a moment. "Yes. I know," he said. "That's why it matters." His words hit her like fire. All her life, she had been taught strength meant never kneeling, never helping the weak. But now, in the arms of a slave, she had been carried like something precious. The strange thing was, she didn't feel weak anymore. She felt human. In the morning, she asked, "What's your name?" He looked surprised. No one had asked him that in years. "Callum." She nodded slowly. "Thalzara." He chuckled. "I know. Everyone knows." She looked down at her bandaged leg. "It may never work again." "Then I'll carry you," he said without hesitation. That silence returned, but now it wasn't heavy. It was something else. A beginning. The fire crackled low inside the cave. "Queen." Thalzara lay still, half asleep, her body wrapped in worn blankets. Her golden hair, once tied in warrior braids, was loose, tangled from days of blood and rain. Her armor had been stripped, set in the corner to dry. Her leg was still useless. Callum sat near the cave entrance, holding a long metal rod sharpened to a point. His eyes hadn't closed in 2 days. He listened, and he waited, because something was out there. At first it was just rustling, then the distant whir of hover drone engines. Red lights blinked in the fog outside the cave, scanning every rock and tree. Thalzara stirred. "They're here." Callum nodded. "They're sweeping the dead zones." She gritted her teeth. "They're not here to rescue me." "I know. If they find me, they'll kill you too." He gave a tired smile. "That part I figured out when I carried a bleeding alien queen across a battlefield." She almost smiled back, but her pride stopped her. Suddenly, a flash of red light passed over the cave. A long, thin scanner beam. Callum pushed the fire back, covering it with wet leaves. He motioned for silence. Thalzara's heart pounded in her chest. For the first time in her life. She was not in control, she was prey, and he, her former slave, was the only shield between her and death. The drone hovered close. It made a strange humming sound. Mechanical, searching, hungry. Callum slid closer to her and whispered, "Don't move, don't even breathe too hard." She did as he said. The light stopped at the cave mouth. It scanned again, paused, then passed. The drone flew on. After what felt like hours, Callum finally lit the fire again. Thalzara sat up, pale and sweating. "You've done this before," she said. He looked into the fire. "Hunted? Hidden? Survived? Yeah. But you're just a slave," he interrupted. "That's what you made me. Not who I am." She looked away. He wasn't angry, not even bitter. That made it worse. As the rain returned outside, she asked quietly, "Why did your people lose?" Callum stared into the flames. "We didn't lose because we were weak. We lost because we trusted diplomacy. Your empire brought guns to peace talks." Thalzara closed her eyes. She remembered that. Earth's leaders were kind, slow to fight. Her commanders had called them fools. But now one of those fools had just risked his life to protect her. That night Thalzara couldn't sleep. Her leg ached. Her pride was wounded. But something deeper kept her awake. It wasn't just survival now. She was starting to wonder, who was really the strong one here? Just before dawn, they heard movement again. But this time, it wasn't machines. It was voices, rough alien voices, armed patrols. "I have to draw them away," Callum whispered. Thalzara grabbed his arm. "You won't survive." "I don't have to. Just long enough for you to heal." She stared at him, stunned. "You would die. For me?" He stood slowly. "Not for you. For what you might become." But before he could leave, she pulled him close. Her claws gripped his shirt, her breath shallow. "I was taught that humans are weak. That mercy is weakness. But now..." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. He gave her one final look and stepped into the rain. Outside, Callum moved through the fog, fast and loud on purpose. The patrol spotted him, shouted, and chased. Inside the cave, Queen Thalzara clutched the metal rod in her hand. She had never felt more powerless and more angry, not at Callum, but at herself. She had led armies. Now one human was fighting to protect her with nothing but courage. Rain hit the forest like war drums. Callum ran through the thick trees, dodging roots and fallen branches. Behind him, the alien patrol shouted in harsh tones, their footsteps getting closer. Red lights from their rifles lit up the mist. He was bleeding, tired, hungry. But he didn't stop, because behind him, in a cave, injured and alone, was someone who had once called him worthless, and now he was risking everything to keep her alive. Far back in the cave, Queen Thalzara gripped the sharp metal rod in her hands. Her leg throbbed, but the pain didn't matter now. She wasn't afraid of dying anymore. She was afraid of something else, that the one person who had shown her real strength might never come back. Time passed slowly. She tried to move, to crawl, but her legs screamed in pain. Her claws dug into the ground. She cursed herself. She was the queen of fire and iron, not some helpless child. But that's how she felt now. Weak, alone, powerless. Then at last, footsteps. Slow, limping. She raised the rod, eyes wide. And then he appeared, Callum, his face, cut, shirt torn, blood on his side. He collapsed just inside the cave entrance. "Callum," she cried out. He gave a weak smile. Still alive. She dragged herself toward him, pushing aside the firewood. She tore a cloth with her claws and pressed it against his wound. "You're an idiot," she whispered. "You should have run." He looked into her golden eyes. Didn't want to. They sat in silence as the fire warmed the cave again. Callum leaned against the wall. Thalzara stayed close, checking his bandages. Then she asked something she never thought she'd say. Why? Do you keep helping me? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pointed toward the flame. You see that fire? She nodded. Fire can burn, but it can also warm. He looked at her. You've spent your life burning everything around you. I just wanted you to feel warmth. At least once. She froze. That one sentence hit harder than any weapon. He continued. You took my people. You took my freedom. But I still believe in something stronger than revenge. She narrowed her eyes. What's stronger than revenge? Mercy. The word felt strange in the air. Unfamiliar, alien. Thalzara sat back, staring into the flames. No one ever showed me mercy, she said. Not when I was a child, not when I trained. I was told to lead with fear. That mercy was weakness. And do you still believe that? Callum asked. She didn't reply. Because for the first time in her life, she didn't know. Outside the storm began to fade. The jungle was quiet again, and inside that cave something was changing. Not in the weather, not in the war, but in the heart of a warrior queen and the soul of a human slave. She looked at him one more time. You were my servant, she said softly. But now. He raised a brow. Now what? She didn't finish. Instead, she leaned closer and whispered, Now I don't know who's saving who. The morning was quiet, but not peaceful. Mist still clung to the trees like ghosts, and smoke from distant wreckage floated through the air. Callum leaned on a stick as he walked, his side wrapped in fresh bandages. Queen Thalzara sat behind, him on the sled, her leg braced with ship metal and cloth. They were heading back to where it all fell apart, back to the battlefield ruins. Are you sure this is smart? Callum asked without turning. No, Thalzara answered. But if I want to live, I need what's left of my ship's power core, and you need medicine. He nodded. Neither said the real truth. Both were depending on each other now. Hours passed. The trees opened up. Ahead lay metal shards, torn flags, half-buried weapons. The place where she had fallen, it looked different now. Empty. Dead. But she could still feel the heat. The fear. The shame. I used to stand tall here, she whispered. Callum didn't reply. He just helped her off the sled and walked beside her as she limped toward the wreckage. They searched in silence. He lifted heavy panels while she scanned old command boxes. Most of it was destroyed. Then her fingers touched something. Warm. Humming. The core. Found it, she said, voice trembling. But before they could celebrate, a sound echoed from behind a broken transport. Voices. Thalzara's eyes narrowed. Scavengers? Callum peeked around the edge. 3 armed aliens, former mercenaries, now looters, were tearing apart armor and tech. One of them held a plasma blade. Another wore her old captain's badge. She growled low. They're stripping my past. And they'll strip us next if they see us, Callum said. We need to move. But Thalzara shook her head. Not yet. She limped forward before Callum could stop her, dragging the metal brace across the ground. The mercenaries looked up. Is that her? One of them whispered. The queen? No way. She's crippled. But she's still breathing, said the leader, smiling. That means there's still a price on her head. They raised their weapons. Callum stepped in front of her. No, she said firmly. Let me try something. She stood tall, or as tall as she could. You used to serve under me, she said to the leader. You took my orders. You swore an oath. He laughed. And now I'll be paid to bring your head. Funny how things change. Thalzara lowered her eyes for just a second, then looked at Callum. Now, she said. Callum leapt forward, swinging a metal pipe. It struck the first attacker's hand, sending the blade flying. Thalzara grabbed it midair and slashed across the second one's leg. The third ran. They stood together, panting, bleeding, but alive. "I thought you were going to talk to them," Callum said. "I did," she replied. "But they didn't. Listen." Later, as they escaped with the power core, Callum limped beside her. She looked at him. "You didn't have to fight." He smiled. "Neither did you." She paused. "You fight like a warrior." He raised a brow. "You lead like one." They set up camp just beyond the ruins. Callum worked on wiring the power core to a scavenged battery. Thalzara watched his hands. They were rough, but skilled. She had never noticed before. "You never told me what you did before you were captured," she said. "I was a tech specialist," he replied. "Built systems, fixed things." She blinked. "And I used you to clean boots." He laughed softly. "I've had worse jobs." As the fire flickered again, she spoke softly. "I used to think humans were only good for service, for silence, for suffering." "And now?" he asked. She looked at him, her voice like a whisper. "Now I think you saved me from more than just death." Days passed. The jungle grew quieter. The smoke faded. The battlefield was now just a memory, one that haunted them both. Queen Thalzara sat on a fallen tree, watching the wind move through the leaves. Her armor, once gold and proud, was now cracked and dented. Her leg brace clicked with every step, a reminder of her fall. And yet, she was still alive, thanks to a human. Callum returned from the stream, carrying a metal can filled with clean water. His limp was still there, but lighter than before. His shirt was patched. His face had fresh bruises, but he smiled when he saw her awake. "I brought water," he said. She nodded, taking it from him carefully. "Thank you." Again. This was the 5th time she had thanked him in 2 days. She didn't understand why the words felt so strange in her mouth. But also, so right. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Thalzara looked down at her leg. The brace Callum built from junk and wires had kept her walking, but she knew she'd never move the same again. "I was raised to never show weakness," she said softly. Callum didn't speak. He just listened. "My people will never follow a queen who limps," she continued. "To them, broken means worthless," Callum finally replied. "Then maybe it's time they learn a different kind of strength." She stared at him. "What do you mean?" He poked the fire. Sparks flew upward. "You're still breathing, still leading, still fighting. That's not weakness." She looked into the flames. "They won't see it that way." "Then let them, so you walk through fire." The next morning, Callum worked on her brace again, adding a spring joint, adjusting the angle. He had no tools, just clever hands and scraps of wire. Thalzara tried to stand. She wobbled. She growled. She fell. And again. And again. But she kept trying. By sunset, she walked 10 steps. Callum clapped. "Told you, fire doesn't burn the queen. It builds her." She rolled her eyes, but a small smile touched her lips. "You talk too much, human. And you fall too much, queen." They both laughed. For the first time in weeks, it felt normal. Later that night, they sat beside each other in the cave. Callum was carving something on a flat piece of metal. Thalzara leaned closer. "What's that?" He turned it toward her. A crude symbol. Half of her royal crest and half a human star flag. She frowned. "That doesn't exist." "Not yet," he said. "But maybe it should." Silence filled the cave. Then she whispered, "Would you follow a queen who lost her throne?" Callum looked at her with calm eyes. "I'd follow a queen who found her heart." She said nothing for a long time. But inside her, something shifted. Not just bones, not just pride, but purpose. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was changing. and maybe leading again. But this time with someone by her side. The sky glowed orange as dawn rose over the broken planet. Queen Thalzara stood on a cliff overlooking the battlefield that had once been her kingdom. Her brace clicked softly as she shifted her weight. Behind her stood Callum, quiet and steady. No longer a slave, no longer afraid. They had returned for one reason, to be seen. A small rebel camp waited at the base of the hill. Fighters, scavengers, a few old commanders, all of them survivors of her shattered empire. When they saw her, many stared. Some bowed slowly. Others looked away in shame. "She lives," one whispered. "But look at her leg. She was carried by a human. She's not the queen she once was." Thalzara stepped forward. Callum offered her his arm. She didn't take it, not because she was ashamed, but because she was ready to stand alone. She limped into the center of the camp, her long coat flowing behind her like a cape. "I know what you think," she said, voice loud and sharp, "that I'm broken, that I'm no longer strong, that I have no right to rule." She paused. "You're right." Gasps filled the air. She raised her chin. "I am not the queen you knew. I lost the battle. I lost my leg. And I lost the empire that taught me to crush the weak. But I gained something far greater." She pointed toward Callum, who stood at the edge of the crowd. "I gained the courage to admit I was wrong." The crowd went silent. He saved me when no one else would. Not because I was his queen, but because I was a life worth saving. She looked around. "Would any of you have done the same?" No one answered. She continued. "We are taught to lead with fear, but I have walked with someone who led me with compassion, and I will never go back to the way I was." One of the old generals stepped forward. "So what now? You expect us to follow a limping queen and her pet human?" Callum stepped beside her. Before she could answer, he did. "She's not asking for blind loyalty. She's asking you to be better." "Better?" the general scoffed. "Yes," Callum said calmly. "Better than what broke this world. Better than what left her to die. Better than what taught you to abandon your own." The general went quiet. Thalzara placed her hand on Callum's shoulder. "This man is not my pet. He's not my slave. He is my protector, and the reason I still breathe." She looked out across the gathering, her golden eyes fierce. "I make a vow before you all. From this day forward, I rule not with fear, but with truth, with strength, not cruelty. And if that makes me weak in your eyes, then leave now." No one moved. Then, slowly, one warrior stepped forward and knelt, then another, and another, until the camp bowed before her, not out of fear, but out of respect. Later that night, Callum and Thalzara stood beneath the stars. "You could have stayed hidden," he said. "Why come back?" She looked at the firelight below. "Because a queen must rise even if her wings are broken." He smiled. "So, what now?" She looked at him, her voice soft. "Now I rebuild. Not an empire of chains, but a future worth fighting for." He nodded. "And you're human?" She stepped closer, her voice low. "My human stays by my side."